the Craggy Rugby Podcast. I'm Rob Murphy. It's a down week for rugby, so what we're doing during this season is introducing a little bit of a conversation podcast to break up the monotonous week of no rugby. I'm sure you're all missing it this weekend. We'll be back for the Dragons game the following week, and of course we'll have our big build-up with that. But today, we've got a crew on board to discuss what happened at the weekend, the Irish squad, and some other details as well. A big talking point right now is all the contracts. Lots to talk about on the Connacht scene, and three Craggy crew members have joined us. Danny Deegan, welcome along.
How's it going, guys?
Good to have you on board. Linley MacKenzie, how are you this evening?
I'm very well, thank you, Rob. Good evening.
Good evening to you too. And Niall, Sheil, how are you?
I'm super, Rob. How are things?
Good to have you back on board. Everyone sounded great today. I'm loving the old reception on your microphones. Let's keep that going. What a start to do. Let's start with the weekend. Myself and Linley were there. Maybe I'll get to Linley third then. I'll talk to the two lads who weren't there. Niall, what did you make of it watching from home? Your thoughts of the disappointing result? I think we can safely say somewhat unexpected defeat for Connacht.
Yeah, it was only, today, or was it? Yeah, today I actually realised that we give them a bonus point win and we're at home. It really just slipped because I just, I kind of thought we got the losing bonus point or whatever. But it was 20 minutes of a good performance and 60 minutes of a terrible one. I think after half-time killed us, though. It's a shame, shocking. It's hard to know what went wrong. But I hope they sort it out.
Yeah, I was saying in my own report now today that, it's ridiculous how accommodating the Sportsground has become for all these teams. And it starts to kind of really great when you see the Ospreys, Scarlets leave really happy, Munster leave a little bit relieved but happy, Bristol, Ulster. It's kind of quite the list now, isn't it?
Yeah, it's far too long now at this stage. I suppose it's hard to know what to pinpoint it. You'd be hoping that it's not a crowd that they need because there's a crowd nowhere else. So it's really hard to understand it. They're playing really well in fits and starts, but outside of that, maybe it was supposed to be a down week, and then they decided, the game was brought on. Might have affected things, but you'd hope to be professional enough for that not to make a difference. But I don't know, just a shocker of a performance, really.
Can I jump in there?
Enough. Yeah, go for it.
Just to expand on your point there, Packie. Maybe because everything was going well, they weren't making silly mistakes that they made at the weekend in the build up to this because they were playing games constantly. Maybe this week off has. Even though they said that they needed it, that week off has given these guys time to think because a lot of them are out of contract, and maybe that's playing a part. Now, I'm not making excuses, but I'm just saying that can affect guys. It's not like before when you had a week off that you could go off and I don't know, go on a quick break or whatever. But now you're stuck at home and you're stuck with your thoughts. Maybe guys got a little bit too much stuck in their head.
Well, I do think, Danny, and I'll go back to you on this, I do think that they're getting stuck in their head within games. I said, leaving the Sportsground the last day, that I don't remember a Connacht team having as wildly fluctuating peaks and troughs within 80 minutes as this team has done on a number of occasions during the season. So they were, top of the world going in at half time. And within 7-8 minutes of the second half, like the body language, they've conceded a try while still having an extra man. They're getting pummeled in the maul. They do seem to drop their heads very quickly, and it seems to be something that's cropped up quite a bit during the season. Niall, do you want to go now?
Yeah, go now.
That's actually something that it seems to have happened a little bit. The body language from them, and I know you can't measure that, or it's not quantifiable or whatever, but it does look poor. Regularly, it does look poor, and like in the Munster game, they looked really off for a good while, and then Jack took control of things, and all of a sudden there were tails up again, but it was possibly a touch false because when it came to that end game, like they seemed to be at sixes and sevens as to what they were going to try. Now this is the Munster match I'm talking about, whereas and even at the weekend there. they got into that commanding lead without really having to do anything. It kind of offered for them. It just, they took, what I mean is they took that opportunity really well. But when something started to go wrong against them, it just they just seem to fall down a bit. Now I know they're working on this with that Jack Birthwhistle and all that, but it's funny that you say it. It was something that struck me at the time, and it's just you've reminded me there again. So I don't know. Maybe there's something in it. Maybe there's something in that. Maybe they're like Danny's saying about the contracts or whatever. I can understand that too. Like I mean, we're reading in the new paper today that the contract negotiations have only started this week. So I don't know, maybe it has played in their minds. I don't know, what do you guys think?
It's difficult, but the only thing is, you'd imagine it's difficult for Ospreys players. It's difficult for a lot of players. Linley, your thoughts? You were there, just down the benches from myself the last day. I mean, did you get that feeling early in the second half that this is getting away from Connacht? I mean, even when it got to, that even when the Ospreys got that first converted try, I had a very bad feeling all of a sudden, despite the fact that Connacht had just come out from half time leading by 12.
Yeah, I think that's because the Ospreys changed their tactics completely in the second half. I think in the first half they tried to play an open game. And also let's face it, who did they come with? They came with, I think, was it 5 of their 6 internationals. They had a really strong pack. They had a really strong team out. They didn't take this for granted. They didn't take it lightly. And in the second half, you could see that they changed their tactics completely. They decided to maul. And I think they are the team with the highest number of tries from their maul this season in the Pro 14. And I think when they realized they were 17-5 down, they said, we've got to get this job done, and we're going to maul again. And unfortunately, that came in the second half. And in the second half, there's only so much that the Connacht pack can withstand of that. And they bring the subs on, and, they're not up to speed, so to speak. I'm not sure if they made a huge impact when they came on. You had to chop and change the pack, because you could see that some of the players were actually quite exhausted, halfway through the second half. And so I'm not so critical or harsh on them, because I just think that the Ospreys pack was a better, stronger pack, and they played to their strengths in the second half. And then you look at their backs and who they have in their backs, and they're full of quality there. So I'm not quite so. I don't feel quite so hard on. I feel that yes, they let a 17-5 lead go, but the Ospreys, on the balance of their team and the way they played in the second half to their strengths, I think it's obviously well deserving of it.
Maul defence is a problem all season, lads. Danny, thoughts?
Massive issue. Well, what I'm frustrated with is that since the Racing game, everybody's just mauled against us. Even teams that wouldn't necessarily maul have just decided, well, Connacht can't defend mauls, and we're just going to keep doing it. My issue would be is, why do we keep doing the same thing? Sean O'Brien has tried it, and so has Sean Masterson, to sack as the players come down. But I can't remember visibly anybody else trying it. Like, why didn't we try that at the weekend? Like, how they mauled against us so often, and we always tried to just blast them out of it rather than trying to sack it. When smashing them all and it's not working time and time again, you have to try something different. Try a sack. Just try it to make them question what you're going to do, rather than just keep doing the same thing. It's the definition of insanity. Keep doing the same thing, expecting something different.
It was funny, Niall, because their try, I don't know if you picked it up in the cameras, their match-winning try, it just was one time when maybe it looked like Connacht had stopped them. This is after the series of penalties in the scrum. The Ospreys took what was, I think, a wise decision, because they noticed the scrum was maybe turning against them, to go to the corner all of a sudden and set up the maul. And it was a really good move by the hooker, just to keep it in. I think it was Perry who was still on the field at the time, just to keep the ball in. This is the point I was making, because, he was about to break away from it, and someone, or himself maybe, just went, wait, hang on, we can reset this maul again. I just think they were, like Linley said there, they were just came out in the second half with one objective, and it was maul.
Yeah, that's fair that they did. I mean, Connacht, further to what Danny's saying, like, Connacht should kind of realise, I suppose, at this stage that what's happening in their maul D is not working so far, but for whatever reason. but it's not working. So they should be expecting other teams are going to maul against them because their maul defense has been so poor. So therefore, they're going to have to work on it and on something for it. Now, maybe they are, or maybe they've had issues where they can't have worked it. Maybe guys have been, quasi-injured in training or whatever, and they can't give it the full breadth of training that they need. But it should, it has to be at the forefront of their. Like if you were playing Connacht in the morning, you'd say, "Well, what are we going to do? We're going to kick to the corner and we're going to maul," and that's our plan. Plan one, that's where they're weak, and they haven't sorted it out yet.
Danny, the scrum just after halftime changed the game, and it was a turning point in the game. Some scrums do have a kind of a tone to them that, you looked at that first half, 3 penalties to Connacht, but they weren't actually contests. It looked like the Ospreys did some work at halftime, figured it out, and they took a huge amount of momentum from that first penalty straight after halftime.
Yeah, in the first half, I actually thought Beelum was doing an amazing job. He was putting his man under pressure, from the hit, and he was just going down. He couldn't handle it. In the second half, I don't know what they said in the changing room, but I actually think it was Buckley that it was at fault. He just never got right for that first scrum. He was just never set right. He just didn't look comfortable from even before they went down. And something that Dan McFarland, back when he coached us years ago in Galwegians, was he said, if you're not comfortable, you stand up. Doesn't matter who it is, who's reffing you or anything. You stand up and you get yourself right. And you go again. And I think Buckley just got himself caught out because maybe he'd been lulled into a false sense of security because they'd done so well in the first half. Or maybe he just got caught up in the moment, but he should have just reset himself.
Well, Lenny, where are we right now? Because we've done the podcast on that game and we've analysed it as best we can. I think you made a really good point there about the internationals in that Ospreys team. Ironically, bringing the game forward meant that you're facing a much tougher Osprey side than you would have faced on February 13th. I know Connacht would have been aware of that and they wouldn't. It's not the end of anything, really. I mean, they were never necessarily going to catch Munster. They're still sitting in a good position with Cardiff and Edinburgh to come to the Sportsground. But one win from 6 does not look good, does it?
Well, no, and neither does 4 in a row of home defeats look good either when you look at the statistics. But as I said, I wasn't surprised about that defeat, despite the fact that it was a home. I think that every time Connacht goes out and seems to lose, they're almost like putting all their emphasis on their away matches to get points, and they've actually done bloody well. It's not all lost at all. It will come down at the moment to whether or not they're not going to catch Munster. I don't believe, but you just never know. If they keep working, they might be able to. But I think it all really will come down to whether or not the Pro 14 fulfills every single fixture in both conferences. And you go to a semi-final or whatever, which is possible, then Connacht have still got a good chance, to get into a final. I think realistically, at this stage, that is still a goal. But I think getting back into the Champions Cup this year is probably a more realistic one, is what they'd be looking to do. So I don't think it's lost. I think there's been quite a bit, every team, it's been it's a difficult year. It's a difficult year for everybody. Connacht have done well. They've introduced quite a lot of young players into the setup this season. They have a situation where the coach doesn't know whether, he didn't know whether he has a contract. Now we're told that, we believe that he has. Mind you, who knows after that performance? You don't know. There's a lot of players out of contract. That all has to affect them. And Connacht are a team that needs to be, I think, because we don't have the big name players, we don't have huge numbers of stars. It's a team that really has to play for each other and all be confident and on one page. And I think possibly there's just a little bit of a struggle when on certain occasions. And obviously last Sunday was one of those.
Niall, do you have any concern like that? What we've seen on the field over the last 5 or 6 weeks had any, any kind of impact on 4 and maybe not more being involved with Ireland? Or ironically enough, is it not as on form as maybe you'd like to see it, if you know what I'm trying to say as well? Like, in a weird sort of way, would it have made much of a difference if they had snuck a victory over Munster and Ospreys?
Well, I suppose if they'd snuck the victory over Munster, the world and its mother would be loading Jack Carty, but he seems to be taking the fall for a collective brain fart in the forward pack. Do you know what I mean? He seems to be taking that. He brought Connacht back into the game through the kicking that is unparalleled in Ireland. So certainly, if I were him, I would be extremely annoyed. No, he says he wouldn't, but I'd be looking for answers. Similarly, I know Kieran Marion probably hasn't had his best season so far, but he's been a player that's been he's treated abysmally by by Ireland now over the last while. And then I see Tadhg Furlong getting called into the squad again. The man hasn't played in the guts of a year. On form. Oh, absolutely on form. He's the best tight head prop in the world. But he just gets dropped back into the squad. And I don't believe it's because he's from Leinster or anything like that. But it's just form doesn't mean anything when it comes to the Irish squad. It's who the coach seems most comfortable with, and that's damning enough. And it's hard enough for the likes of Connacht or the likes of Munster, Leinster, Ulster for players that are at that level underneath. They're playing really well. John Cooney, case in point, from Ulster. So we're not speaking about Connacht guys the whole time. Who's was the top scorer in Europe, possibly the top try scorer in Europe, playing fantastically with not the greatest pack in the world in Ulster. And, Conor Murray, for all his gifts, was playing really poorly. But he could continue to play poorly, safe in the knowledge that his position wasn't under threat. No matter what is being said in the papers, no matter what has been said by squad members, it's just, it's self-perpetuating the whole time. It's easier to get out of this. It's easier to get out of the squad than it is to get into it, or whatever that analogy is. It's not something I agree with, and I just think they have opportunities regularly, and they had the fucking Autumn Nations Cup where they could play loads of different players. 6 games for something that didn't matter
at all.
It didn't matter one iota. It was this opportunity to play players and blood players and try and get guys in, and they just didn't do it. So, the more it changes, the more it stays the same, as far as I'm concerned with that front. And to be honest with you, and I have to be perfectly honest here, I'm not as big an Ireland fan because of it. And that's the way it is for me,
Yeah, I think among Connacht rugby people, there is a fluctuating kind of interest level with the Irish team at times, because and Danny, I'll get your thoughts, but I'll start with this question, which is, we see how Finlay Bealham gets thrown in on a rather strange experiment at Loosehead at international level, as Nigel Carolan said in a press conference a week later. Well, we wouldn't have thought to do it at Connacht level, and he didn't say anything more than that, but why in God's name are you guys doing it? But then he gets criticised heavily in a couple of newspapers articles, and there's no one from the Irish management coming out to say, hang on a minute now, even coming out defending him, and saying, listen, we were trying something and he was brilliant and he was fantastic, which he was, by the way, in that role. Just your thoughts on that. That's what leaves Connacht people just feeling so disconnected from the Irish rugby scene, because they feel like their players just don't get that fair, balanced kind of assessment.
Well, what I don't understand about that whole thing is why wasn't any other, say, Loosehead in Ireland even thought about?
Like Dennis Buckley, for example?
Exactly. That's who I was going to say. Over 170 caps for Connacht, and you'd rather turn a tight head into a loosehead for a game at international level. That's just madness to me.
And now he's out of the squad, Danny, and you're just there going, I
feel like they look for scapegoats. They'll try something. As Packie was saying, that Jack seemed to take the flack of what the forwards did against Munster. Jack seemed to get a lot of flack for the Ireland game against Japan in the World Cup, and I think it's very undeserved, because the momentum shifted in that game from an overthrown lineout, and then our scrum gets annihilated. So I'm not sure what an out half can do there, but again, Jack came out pretty bad there. And then you look at Conor Murray, who's played poorly for 3 years, but is picked time and time again. And there's guys that are clearly better, as Packie mentioned, John Cooney, who was in the form of his life, but he gets one chance, doesn't do particularly well, but that's him. He's gone. He's not good enough. Yet we keep going back to Conor Murray, who hadn't been playing well for 3 years.
Just going to go indulge ourselves for a second and go through the team that played Japan that day. It was Healy, Best and Furlong, Henderson and Ryan in second row, O'Mahony, Van de Fleer and CJ Sander in the back row, Murray and Carty, obviously the half-back pair, and it was Farrell and Ringrose, and it was Stockdale, Earls and Carney. And Joey Carberry was among the subs coming off the bench, Jordan Larmour as well, Tadhg Byrne, Andrew Porter. Carberry came on, couldn't see the game out. For me, Danny, that day was one of Jack Carty's best performances in an Ireland jersey for the first half, and obviously during that second half, he, along with the other star names in that team, couldn't get the job done and couldn't figure it out. Neither could Carberry either when he came on. So this is the kind of logic. We bring this up because we know it's a game that is, Carty has taken a lot of criticism for and didn't get a lot of defence from his Irish management team, and he seems to be carried the blame. Actually, Niall, you want to come in there, go for it.
Well, that's the whole point. It's none of their fault. They had nothing to do with it at all. Rob, don't you realise that it's the out half that was playing such fantastic rugby for God knows how long, was just after getting his head on the team. He's the guy you have to blame, and it's repeated. Same way with Finlay the last day. Should have played your man from Ulster, O'Sullivan, the following week there in the in the Autumn Nations Cup. They just drafted him in. They couldn't play him the week before. Who is a loosehead? And give Finlay a go at tight head, which he's pretty freaking good at. But kind of further to what you're saying, it's like all these guys get their get out of jail card. And if you just, I don't know, if you've the wrong name after your own name, if the wrong place name after your own name, it seems to be a bit of a problem. And I just find it funny that it happens over and over and over again,
Well, I think I can't fathom some of the selections in terms of, say, Kieran Marmion, who has gone from being the number 2 to Conor Murray, usurped at the World Cup, so he becomes number 3. He gets back into the squad, and then he's still number 3, but yet he continues to have to go to training sessions for the autumn season. He's like the 26th man. He's still there, so he can't play for Connacht at the same time. And when you look at the ages now, he's no longer the number 3 now. He's basically dropped again to the 4th because you've introduced Craig Casey at 21 years of age. Now Gibson Parker's 28. Marmion's 28, and now you've got Craig Casey coming in at 21 years of age. Is this, you worry about the contracts for players who are out of contract in Connacht, but there's a hell of a lot of players who might have every reason to want to leave. Kieran Marmion has been playing for, I can't remember how many years he's been playing on and off the Irish team, never really done anything wrong, only played in just about so many backline positions, hugely defensive player. And now, so all of a sudden he's gone from being the number 2 to the number 3 to the number 4 without actually even having played a game during this time for Ireland. And I can't seem to fathom it unless there's just saying, well, we know what Marmion's like, we know what Luke McGrath's like, we know what John Cooney's like. Well, we're going to look to the future because we believe that Gibson Park and Conor Murray are going to be there for another couple of years, and then we're going to bring up this young Craig Casey. I'm not really understanding the reason for it.
I cannot fathom it. How he's, in my opinion, Kieran Marmion, I know John Cooney's been treated really badly, and he's lucky to have, the backing of Ulster behind him. But in my opinion, Kieran Marmion has been treated worse than any other Irish international player over the last number of years, than anyone else. It's quite, he really does. He deserves an apology, and if he told them what to do with themselves, he wouldn't be out of his. He wouldn't be wrong because. Go on.
Are we missing anything here, Niall? Like, I mean, you know, because we do have 4 players in the squad. We do get a lot of listeners from outside the province curious as what Connacht think and why they're so. I don't even know. Honestly, I don't even know if anyone who loves rugby outside of Connacht realises how utterly frustrated we are with international selections from Joe Schmidt to Andy Farrell. But, like, you know, Heffernan's in there, Delan's in there, Rue's in there, Aki's in there. What more do you want? I'll play devil's advocate. What more do you want?
Well, I want second choice Connacht players in the Irish squads, just like second and third choice Munster, Leinster, and Ulster players are in the Irish squad. That's what I want. You know, for me, and to me, that's ridiculous because outside of, I was kind of making an argument that outside of tight head and maybe loose head, because tight head prop, it's becoming a position where you play 50 minutes. You know what I mean? That's your lot. So essentially what I'm saying is you could be from a province in Ireland and have the top 2 tight heads playing, okay? And it would be okay to say that. I've nothing against these players, but, you know, Tom O'Toole is not the starting tight head prop for Ulster. I'm not sure he's second choice either. He possibly is. Craig Casey, he's not. Ross Byrne is not the... You know, he's not the first choice Leinster out half. Jim, well, listen, if we go by the last game, Gibson Park isn't the first choice Leinster scrum half. And the first choice Leinster scrum half is not in the Irish squad. There's loads of this. Like, we can have 17 players from one province. It does not make for a good squad. They cannot be battle hardened enough to pull a game out of the fire. You know, if Irish rugby, professional rugby, wants to go on the extra level, wouldn't they have to start? You know, they have to start doing this. They have to start having players from everywhere, and making up an even amount on these teams. And Ireland are going to start falling behind because of these things. Other countries are building depth now because they've a lot more teams. When I say other countries, I mean England and France. They've a lot more teams, so you know you have to be at the top of your game to get into the squad. You don't if you're Irish.
I want to jump in there. Just something you said there, Packie, that the Irish team are going to fall behind. I actually think we're already behind. We can't get past a quarterfinal. No matter what we do at Pro 14 level or how well Leinster and to another degree of Munster and Ulster do in Europe, we can't convert that into playing well in Ireland because we haven't got to a quarter final. Like, we need to change what we're doing. Like, look at the Australians. They played was it a 19-year-old centre in the World Cup, and they've got an out half that's 21. Yet we'll keep going back to, like, in the squad, we've got Sexton, who barely lasted 60 minutes against Munster, yet he's our saviour. You know, like, he's a fabulous 10. He's had a fabulous career, definitely. But if you cannot last a game at club level, how are you going to do it at international level? And that means he is not the best 10 in Ireland. He can't be. If you can't play for 80 minutes, you're not the best in that position. And we need to start looking towards the future. And whether that's they take on Jack or they take Billy Burns, who's playing well for Ulster, you know, like, we need to look past this conservatism where it's the same guys over and over again. And I feel like a lot of guys are living off reputation from that 2018 season. You know, a lot of guys that were in that extremely good Ireland team are still living off that reputation. And I would completely disagree with that, especially at international level. You're only as good as your last game. And I feel like guys that are getting a chance, like Jack did, and everyone forgets that Marmion was the scrum half that played when we won against New Zealand for the first time. But that's never been
Dublin, yeah.
Well,
I think.
How long did Sexton is the thing?
I know.
How long did Sexton last against us?
Yeah, Sexton lasted about 14 minutes against us. Linley.
Well, I often wonder when it does come to these selections, because obviously, as a member of the public here, we're not privy to the reasons why, you know, these coaches select the players that they do. And I often wonder, you know, how often do they pick up the phone and do they talk to someone like Kieran Marmion or Jack Carty and give them the reasons why they're not selected. Because if they don't, then how on earth are they supposed to know how they can improve or the reasons for not being selected? And I think it's very hard for like, you had a performance there that Jack Carty produced against Leinster that was like a perfect performance. I mean, if a performance doesn't like that doesn't put you, within range of getting, being selected on the squad, you kind of wonder, and I know Jack has obviously had his difficulty since coming back from the World Cup. He's had a lot to deal with, and he's having to psychologically deal with all that vilification that he took as well from the media for something that really was out of his control. And I just kind of feel like it's not really up to the local coach or the Connacht coach or whoever is the provincial coach to try to have to deal with the aftermath of that. And as a result, we didn't see Jack for quite a while this season. He's come back. He's now in really good form. And all of a sudden, people are now talking about him, Jack, playing for Ireland again. And then he's not even selected as one of 3 out-halves. And you kind of just wonder what that does psychologically for these players who are working so hard to improve themselves, to get back to playing for Ireland, what it does for them psychologically. And now I know Jack is a very strong person and he is incredibly controlled with the way he deals with these issues. In fact, if you don't mind me saying, I was listening to an RFU Connacht podcast webinar the other night, and Jack was of Tackle Your Feelings one, and Jack was one of the participants in it with and he was sort of asked a question like that, and funny enough, he said that when he was young, he used to read like all the comments made in social media or the newspapers about him. And he said he tries not to do that anymore, but he said he would be lying if he said he didn't still do it. But this week was one of the days when he knew that he shouldn't after the selections were made. And I just, I just thought that's, he is a very strong person and he will continue. Let's face it, he is one player. And when you look at Jack, who actually had potential in so many sports. So he's a natural sports person. He's not just a rugby player. He could have gone to England to play soccer, and he's played on Gaelic football at high levels. So he's not just a rugby player. He's actually a talented sports person, and I think that's kind of lost sometimes on people.
I was reading today he played alongside Jeff Hendrick and Robbie Brady in the Irish under-15 setup, and we know he played for the Roscommon Miners in Croke Park as well, I think an All-Ireland semi-final, I think it was. So, I mean, yeah, that's an incredible sporting background. Linley, back to you for a second. When Willie Moran sits down with these players and the contract's on the table, there's a couple of things. He won't be able to offer what Leon can offer. I bring them up because we know Colby Vaenga went there. He won't be able to offer maybe what some of the English teams can offer. One of the things that he offers is coming from the IRFU, which is like a position within a system that gives you a chance. And you take a guy like, I'm going to just give you one example, Gavin Thornbury, who's like a top quality second row performing at the highest level in the Champions Cup and in Pro 14 to a huge degree, and is not even mentioned in pundit arenas around the Irish setup, and he should be. Is he getting phone calls from the RFU? Is he being engaged with and all that? So is it making Willie's job harder? And you think it is. I think you've kind of hinted at that. But just when he sits down with these players and says, you want to be here, this is your chance, Paul Boyle, this is your chance, whoever. Now, Paul Boyle signed up for another year, thank God. But, this job is getting more and more difficult. These players probably don't see the pathway anymore.
Yeah, the pathway is a key thing for these players. It's particularly when they get to a certain age, I think. When they're young, they're hoping to get recognised. Every player wants to be recognised nationally. And when they're going to come to a point where if they're not, what is going to keep them here? And it's either going to be love for Connacht, love for money, because it's not both. Or do you go somewhere where you want to play rugby and you want to make a living out of it? And for someone like Gavin Thornbury, who's obviously not a Connacht born and bred player, but I know his father has become a huge fan of Connacht since he has been playing here, you do wonder for them where their future lies. if there's not that pathway and Connacht players continue not to be recognised. And I'm not saying every single player deserves to be on the Irish squad. I'm not, nothing like that. But you do wonder that when they look at that, and Willie looks at it, and of course he's got to try to encourage them to stay. He probably maybe doesn't have the money that the squads do have. It's a tough job. I just hope that hopefully in the next few days that a lot of players are signed up back to Connacht. Otherwise, it'll just get worse.
It's very hard for Andy Friend or Willie Ruan to say to a young player, do you know what? Come down here. We'll get you playing rugby. We'll get you playing good rugby, and you're going to get a shot. Because it's not the case. You don't have to play if you're in other places. You don't have to play in the must-win games. Now, we can be hit with stats. We're saying, well, such and such a player has played X amount of minutes. But when it comes, all right, let's put it this way. I have the Irish squad in front of me here. If Leinster are playing a Heineken Cup game in the morning, Johnny Sexton's starting out half, and Ross Byrne is second choice, possibly third. Craig Casey will not be starting for Munster. Tom O'Toole will not be starting for Ulster. Even in the back rows and all this sort of thing. So you don't have to be that player. There's
wow.
You
get an easier ride.
Oh no. Yeah. Well, I'm not even saying that, but it's like you're not trusted when you're here, and that's going to be really tough, Willie Ruan. And if we're saying it, every player must think of it. Like at this stage, it's better for, I don't know, pick a random player in whatever Leinster squad, pick any randomer from whatever position. It looks, and you can't say that it isn't. It looks you're better off staying there than try to come somewhere else and play and be first choice and make a massive difference. I'll never forget Byron Kelleher, an interview that I read that he'd given, and where he said I'm not sure. Linley will probably correct me if I'm wrong here. I think he's from Auckland, possibly, or Canterbury. I know they're two massively different places, but he was from where a lot of the players come from. But he went to the Chiefs because they were the weakest franchise. Because he felt if I go there and I can make a huge difference, that's where I can become an All Black, and he did. Do you know what I mean? Yeah. No Irish player will ever consider that. A fringe Irish player, a fringe Irish squad player. I don't think they'll will ever think that. And to be honest with you, they would possibly be right. Like even look at the current players in the Connacht squad. You've the likes of Dennis Buckley now, Finlay, loads of other players that are moving on in their career. Are they going to stay in Ireland? The carrot must be, I'm getting a chance. I'm going to get a chance to play for Ireland. And I'm not saying that Ireland should hand out caps, but Jesus, nobody can tell me that Dennis Buckley didn't deserve to get an Irish cap from almost when he started playing for Connacht.
Yeah. Look at the props he scrummaged against in the Champions Cup.
We've never seen him beaten. He has never been beaten by.
It's incredible. Like, Danny, will you do that in the next week or two? Just for another podcast, just make us a list, because like the list will blow people's minds, and we'll take we'll force you to go back into the video archives and watch some of the scrums against all these world class props across Europe, time and time again. He scrummaged well, and then people say, "Oh, but maybe he just doesn't have enough around the park." Grand, but how has he not got a single cap? For the love of God, it's just ridiculous. But can I just go back on this really quickly around the table, guys? And like you first, Niall, then Linley, then Danny. The general consensus among us is Andy Friend has been good for Connacht, and his re-signing is good for Connacht. I want each of you to explain that just a little bit clearer. I think Danny has already, but Niall.
Yeah, I think it's really good for Connacht because I think when he does leave, that he'll leave Connacht in an awful lot better place. Not so much that he might bring us to bigger heights, but that he will leave the foundations in place for a squad to be built, so that a squad can be built on year and year. Because when you hear him speak, he does talk about the player, and how he puts confidence in players. As far as I can see, refuses to say anything negative towards these players. He might in the collective, he might say something, but refuses to round on any player. He's a fantastic coach. He's like a really great guy as well. And but I think we'll be in a lot better position because of it.
Linley.
Yeah, I think Andy kind of reminds me in some ways of more like Pat Lam, in the sense that he likes to deal with the sort of the holistic elements of the players and the squad and the people. And I think that's very important, particularly when you're dealing with, a young group of players and even older players who still need that confidence because maybe of the issues that they have to deal with in Connacht of not being selected, etc. And the fallout always is going to fall on the coach. And I think he does a very good job of that, of keeping that squad together. I also think the other thing about him is that he actually allows the assistant coaches like Nigel and Jimmy to take a lead role. He's not, unlike Pat, who had control basically of a lot in Connacht, and maybe he needed to at that time in Connacht. I'm not sure if he has the same manner in possibly in Bristol, but whereas Andy Friend actually gives the assistant coaches the responsibility to do their job, and I think that is also helping them grow. The other thing I would say is when he brought together, I'm not sure whether it was out of necessity or whether it was his own choice, when he brought together the academy into the senior squad. Once upon a time, they were separate. They trained separately. They hardly, very infrequently met. They were completely separate. The numbers had to be shortened because of, I think, of the financial situation in COVID. So we've got a smaller academy, but they are training at a level that the senior squad is now training with. They are being introduced to the whole standards that the senior squad, which is only good for the development of Connacht rugby and for those players. And we've seen a lot more of them since Andy Friend has been in Connacht, actually playing in matches. Sometimes I've scratched my head and thought, Jesus, like, who is that lad that he's bringing in, And they have all performed incredibly well. And I think that is going to have to be the way forward too, I think, because we know that we have a reasonably small squad. We need those players. And I think he's done an exceptional job with the way that he has introduced the young players into the senior squad.
Brilliant summation. And Danny, I'll give that point to you to just take on a bit, because that is one of the reasons why I have a lot of hope, even though there's so much uncertainty with so many players up for for new contracts, and that sense that we're not going to be able to just dip into the market in this current financial crisis and COVID crisis. So there's a lot of young players coming to. Sean Masterson, a great example. I remember Paul Boyle getting his debut. I think, was he 21? I think he was only 20 when he got his debut. Like he really does just go, you're there, you're good enough, on you go. We've used like 7 props this year. I think maybe 8. He's digging deep down into his resources. He's trusting guys. I'm impressed with that. Colin Riley, he's been great this year. Another example.
He has. Well, Friend has brought the attitude that you see in in the Southern Hemisphere, which is, if you're good enough, you're old enough. So he's bringing guys through that are obviously performing, and you can see it. Whoever steps in, you can see it when subs come on during the season. That even if there's a bit of a shuffle around, guys are just slotting in and they're just going for it. And I think that just comes from his kind of mantra that he's so honest, and he just demands honesty from his players. And I think that it just levels the playing field and everyone's on the same page. And I think another reason why we really need to, it's one of the reasons we really need to hold on to him, is that he's brought a full team collective, and it's about the squad and not just the starting 15 kind of a thing. It's about everybody. It's about the whole team, and it was something that Pat Lam had.
I think the other thing, if I can just interrupt a minute, is the fact that he has, I think he deserves at least another year or 2 years. And when you have to consider that COVID has interrupted the whole of his rugby this season anyway. So I think that's another reason why I think he deserves a little bit longer, in Connacht, because he's had to deal with that. The other thing is, like every other coach who's a foreign coach, they have knowledge of the players in their own home countries who are available or who could do a job. Now, I know Pat Lam did a huge job when it came to bringing Mills Miliaina in. Now, while we know that Mills wasn't at his best on the playing pitch, it was more of a statement of intent. And I know that when it came, it was very important for Connacht at that time, because when they went looking for players, they were from agents, they were never given the top players. They were always given like the second or the third sort of level players. But getting Mills was a statement that they were able to have those players, and it did change, the way that people and the agents did view Connacht, that we were prepared to get good players in and that we could afford to pay them. So I think what Andy has done also with his local players is he's been able to bring in a couple of players, and I don't know what they're being paid, but one would imagine that Ben O'Donnell is not going to be paid a huge fortune, given the fact that he has had to come over here and rehabilitate, and he's changing codes, etc., etc. So I think it's always good to see when a foreign coach is here that they can bring, their players. They have a knowledge of the players in their own country, and ones that could make a difference in Connacht without necessarily breaking the bank. Let's face it, we don't ever get players who break the bank here.
Finish on this, right? I want to get your final thoughts on where we stand right now, because there's so much more to talk about. And over the next couple of weeks, we obviously have a preview of the Dragons game, and then there's another down week. And in that down week, we should have some contract announcements, I'm sure. We should have some concrete stuff to talk about around that. So we'll see where we are then, and maybe we can kind of look towards what next season's looking like. But right now, how are we? I want to get each of you to just give me your feeling overall of where Connacht sit and how you feel about the Connacht after that disappointing defeat to Ospreys. And I'll put it this way. In our role, in what we do, podcasting and reporting on the Connacht team, we tend to be more ingrained in the thought process, and probably we don't have as much ups and downs as we would as supporters. And I know this myself from following football and other American sports. I mean, my team loses and I'm the end of the world, and they win and everything's top of the world. Right now, I think we're giving across this even keel feel. That's what's coming across in the podcast. That's the sense that, we've lost 5 from 6. That's not good. Okay, there's some serious decision-making issues on the pitch. There's problems with the mauls. There's loads of different issues. Yet I do get a sense that you guys aren't necessarily feeling doom and gloom about things. So with that in mind, Danny, you go first. How are you feeling about where we are right now?
But that's the thing. It's a bit of a mixed emotion, because after that Munster game, like you say, that we've kind of given a very even keel. I think I had to go out for a walk just to calm down, But then you see the Leicester game, I was high as a kite. It's that mix of levels, and I think what I get so frustrated about when watching Connacht is that through this season you've seen us just we die on our feet. You look back at that. I know we keep saying it, the Racing game, or even the Bristol game. Like we were getting in guys' faces, and we were making a nuisance of ourselves. But we didn't say the other side of that was the Ulster game, and to an extent that game of the weekend where we lost composure, and it was just so frustrating. It was just like watching Connacht of old. And it's just so depressing, really, and so frustrating, because we know how well these guys can play. So I guess, when we do come across a bit mixed, but I think that's after you come away from it and you look at it, it's like maybe we weren't that bad, and we actually have done well over the season.
Yeah, I remember the Scarlets game, which was a calamity, also had like 5 or 6 wonderful attacks that should have had a try but for a drop ball going over the line. So the flip side of that is it was such a fine line. But then I also pick out Edinburgh away as one of our best performances this season. Glasgow at home was a stunning home performance to start the season. Ulster in the Aviva back in August was a fantastic display. So there's a weird mix, Niall. We've had it all this year. We've really had it all.
Yeah, correct. I feel like we had that, that ridiculous high for going on 5 years ago now of the league win, but we kind of got there. But I think we were trying to maybe live up to that again. So I think Connacht had to strip back a little bit, come back a bit further than maybe they would have liked to, change tack a bit more. But I think the one thing that's missing, I think, at the minute is where we were a team, especially led by Mull, like that would hammer the other opposition. Like, when they played the game against Connacht, they friggin' knew it coming in off the pitch. And I don't think other teams are feeling that now, but that that's possibly an easier thing to rectify than up in quality levels of players and, players' own particular skills. So I think we're on the way back. I'm not despondent. I'm not despondent at all. I think you're saying it's a 50% win ratio. I think that's probably about right for how we're playing. But if you look at this season, like, even though the last day we could have been beaten, well beaten, I think we could have won the game with a bit more composure, like you're saying, and a bit more, a bit more guts. And the same with the Munster game. We looked like a team that didn't feel we could win that game or should win that game. And next thing, the opportunity was there and it fell away. And against Ulster, they got their dander up and we weren't able to counteract that. So that's possibly the missing piece of the jigsaw, because we've some wonderfully talented footballers like Jack and Conor Fitz. I think he just suffered from lack of game time really at the weekend. He kicked very well, he passed quite well and all that. Maybe he didn't lead the game as well as he should. But regardless of that, we've all these other players coming that were kind of, there's loads of great points in all these players, but it's just to marry it all together now and just to add a bit more heart to it. And I think, Connacht will be fine, and they'll be fine anyway. But that's the missing piece of the jigsaw for me anyway. So I think we're on an upward trajectory, but I just need maybe a small injection of talent here and there.
Linley, final thought.
Yeah, I think I'm a little bit despondent, obviously, about some of the results, but in the overall picture, I think what we really need is what every team looks for, and that's the consistency of performance, because you can go from the high of beating Leinster to some of the performance we've had since, and against the Ospreys, possibly one of them. So I think that consistency and a greater belief in themselves that they have it, that they can do it. But I think consistency is huge, and I think that's what Pat Lam was able to do when he was here. And I don't want to keep comparing coaches and whatever and squads to Pat Lam, but I think once they got that consistency, they got greater belief in themselves. But I'm not despondent. I think the organisation is in a better place. I think whatever about COVID on the pitch, I think it has opened the squad's eyes to a lot of different ways that they can bond together as a squad. And I think that is actually going to only make them better people and better players. So hopefully there's going to be positives that come from the whole COVID situation. But one would wonder at the moment, does Andy Friend have the players, the required number of players to produce that consistency? He's introduced a lot of young players, but when you do come up against the likes of the Racings or some of the stronger teams, particularly up front, does he have the required number of players to do that? I'm not so sure.
Well, as an example, 4 Lions that were in the Ospreys team.
Yeah. Well, I think it's important to finish this podcast and say, well, that block of games every year, we all know them, it's done. And it's always the toughest block when you're in the Champions Cup, because usually you have 4, we only had 2, but usually you have 4 Champions Cup games mixed in with 3 interpros that may as well be Champions Cup games against full strength sides to a large degree. So yeah, that's done. What comes next might well be better. We'll see. There are players to return. That's it from us. Big thanks to the guys. We'll be back within a week for the preview of the Dragons game. Yeah, Connacht back in action in Wales, and lots more rugby to come. 5 games. There's actual fixtures. Dave Finn was wondering about fixtures a week ago. Well, they're there now, so we can look to the future. Talk to you soon.
Slán.
Bye.
See you.
Slán go fóil.
Loose, cut it loose. Break out or nothing changes. Sad and confused. Don't wait until